I had come to a time in life when I felt, as Dostoevsky must have felt, just before he had a fit, that the world was so beautiful that my understanding of it could not continue, that it would have to break to make it bearable. There is a subject nowadays which is taboo in the way that sexuality was once taboo, which is to talk about life as if it had any meaning. I thought the meaning is in the fit and therefore hidden. Person in relationship to themselves is in the form of a question. That's fine. Yeah, and the question is, what the hell am I doing? That's the question. And that isn't a stupid question, because once you've asked that question, things start happening. That's the point. You're not controlling. You can't ask that question and think you're in control. It's a sort of cry, it's a sort of prayer. Then the mysterious thing about life is then actually things happen. By having uttered that cry, that has been a little cry of not control, but putting oneself in the way of some sort of working activity. One sparked off something that's sort of happening in relation between oneself and the world. Yeah.
Nicholas Mosley's first book, Spaces of the Dark, was published in 1951. It was said by a reviewer to be written with a certain freshness that was more hopeful than what was to be found in many smoother novels. In 1990, his 20th book, Hopeful Monsters, which is about the possibilities of human evolution, was awarded the prestigious Whitbread Prize, and it was described as the best English novel written since the Second World War. For most of his life, Mosley has been better known as the eldest son of Sir Oswald Mosley, who in the 1930s defied political conventions to lead the British Union of Fascists. But Mosley's unusual family history has proved to have been fertile ground. He says he began writing because it helped him to understand his experiences, and the challenges of his life and of writing have been bound together. His efforts to cope with influences from his past are reflected in his insistence that survival depends upon growth and change.
The day came when my garden, in the books it was called an aqua terrarium, was ready. I bicycled into Miss Box to pick up my salamanders. They were two small bright lizards about 6 inches long. Their skin was mainly black but had gold patches and hoops. And then, when they were in the bright fair world that I had constructed for them, they were, yes, like jewels. They were so beautiful. They would be, yes, on the silver sand by the stones like gold or diamonds, like things made immortal by a painting. My mother came up to look at my aquaterrarium. She said, "That's beautiful." I said, "Yes." "What are they called?" "Adam and Eve." "What good names." I said, "I think they might also be what are called hopeful monsters." She said, "What are hopeful monsters?" I said, "They are things born perhaps slightly before their time, when it's not known if the environment is quite ready for them." She said, "So you have made an environment that might be ready for them?" I said, "Yes." She put her arms round me and hugged me. She said, "You are my hopeful monster."
Young Max wanted to provide for his salamanders a setting in which love could operate. The novel traces the journeys of Max and his German Jewish girlfriend Eleanor, which begin in the 1920s and take them through the Spanish Civil War and World War II. Their bond is that they both want, above all, to learn about life. They are prime representatives of a type which has evolved in Mosley's writing over almost half a century. His aim is to engage readers in the style of Max and Eleanor's explorations.
That's what I think is the excitement about reading. There's always something round the corner that I'm having to be alert to be able to find out what it is. Then it is there. And then when it is there, it is not something you completely pin down and can put into simple words. What is there is something that you have had to look for, and you're looking for it is part of what's actually there. This is what's so extraordinary. This is the liveliness of life, as one might put it, that one doesn't quite know what's going on, but one's always on the edge of knowing and not exactly being able to pin it down. It's always a search and a learning and an excitement and a wonder.
At the time of these discussions, Mosley was working on his autobiography. He was looking at his own books in relation to his environment, asking why he wrote them as he did, and asking how the events of his life might have been affected by his own attitudes and ways of seeing. When Nicholas was born in 1923, his father, Oswald Mosley, had already been the Member of Parliament for Harrow for almost 5 years. What he had seen during the First World War had appalled him. In politics, he hoped to prevent its recurrence and to improve prospects for the returning soldier and working man. His oratory charmed eminent politicians, and in social life he was dashing and seductive. Nicholas's mother was Lady Cynthia Curzon, the second daughter of George Curzon, who had been Viceroy of India. Their high society wedding in 1920 was attended by King George V and Queen Mary. Tom and Cindy, as they were known, were in love, and their letters to one another were garnished with endearments. However, in reality their marriage also conformed to accepted patterns of deception. Tom's letters celebrate their idyllic romance. Simmy's record the distress caused by his philandering. Although Tom and Cindy tried in their way to be good parents, as was also the custom, Nicholas and his sister and brother were raised largely by a nanny. Nanny Hislop, he said, represented everything steadfast, trustworthy and down-to-earth in our childhood. From his vantage point, his parents' political meetings and elaborate parties and games were like performances. By 1924, Oswald had been a Conservative, an Independent and a Labourite. He was, in Nicholas's words, always something of a one-man party band. Simmy shared most of Tom's socialist ideals, and in 1929 she broke with her family tradition and campaigned to become the Labour MP for Stoke, and won. But at the beginning of the 1930s, frustrated by what he saw as the establishment's disregard of the economic crisis, and despite the fact that he was being spoken of as a future Prime Minister, Oswald sought support for new parties. His most radical venture was the British Union of Fascists, founded in 1932. This is the best-known image of Oswald, striding through the streets of East London in front of a column of black shirts. Despite his denials that it was his aim, his public style and the conduct of the large rallies encouraged an association with the militarism and anti-Semitism of European fascism. Later, Nicholas tried to understand the clever, complex man who seemed to embody paradox, who could somehow believe that it was appropriate to march in military gear for peace.
People have asked me questions about what I feel, what I think, what my relationship is with my father when he was alive and after my father's death. I've had to answer those sort of questions lots of times. He was a man of enormous energy and talent and gift of the gab, of course. But he was bubbling over with ideas and some interest and curiosity about everything. And I greatly admired all this. He was quite a magical person to me as a child. He was also someone who when he went into public life, into his politics, often seemed to get carried away by something that wasn't much to do on the surface with what he was in his private life. He got carried away with this old-fashioned sort of mob oratory that one really never sees now. He was also very good at trotting out the most technical argument about economics and that sort of thing, with lots of facts and figures, so that the case he was arguing seemed to be overwhelming. And then he would let fly with some great peroration, and the whole tone and sort of gear of the speech would be altered, and people would be lifted up off their seats by the emotionalism. This was his public life, and this was his public power. And in private he was funny, he could laugh at himself often. But I used to talk with my father, and I used to say to him, "You're a very odd character, and you have a very odd history. You're a sort of symbol of something. The trouble is the moment people think that you're some symbol of, or demon of the sort of anti-Semite and the fascist, as it were, sort of ally of Hitler, that's what people think. But I think also People should see you in the efforts you've made in public life, your sort of energy and your idealism and the way you're a sort of buccaneer, you aren't a sort of scheming politician. You're the sort of person who, when he gets hold of an idea, has a go.